Following 2018, Nintendo really started to hit its stride with the Nintendo Switch. While its first few years had some great releases like Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, it was often undercut by less successful projects and a lack of consistency in its releases. However, 2019 was poised to be the Switch's biggest year to date. For one, this would be the first year where games on the Nintendo 3DS would not take time away for games for the Switch during Nintendo Directs. Games like Fire Emblem Three Houses and Luigi's Mansion 3 were on the horizon and set to release within a few months. As the year would progress, Nintendo would have several more surprises for fans, such as new IPs, highly anticipated sequels, and revitalizations of games that fans never thought they'd see again. Welcome back to Nintendo Switch Rewind, a look back at the history and surreal success behind Nintendo's most successful console in gaming history. This limited series will explore every year of the Nintendo Switch, one year at a time. Today, in episode 3, we'll be journeying through the third year of Nintendo Switch, the year when the console started to experiment and further establish its reputation as one of the best consoles of all time, 2019. 2019 started slow for Nintendo since its first two games released were remakes. In fact, one of these games was only available on the Nintendo 3DS, Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey. It, alongside the release of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, were poorly received for the most part for various reasons. For one, both felt extremely derivative of their predecessors and offered very little updates to justify the repurchase. While New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe went viral due to the implications of the new Super Crown power-up turning Toadette into a Peach lookalike and fans wondering if that would apply to other characters like Bowser, hence Bowsette, it still wasn't enough to interest players in the long term. It would be a few years before 2D Mario received a true rejuvenation. But until then, despite the great sales of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, this just wasn't a release many Switch owners thought fondly of, especially in the years following its release. Thankfully, after just 2 months, Nintendo announced that its first Direct of the year would be held on February 13th. Everyone expected to see Fire Emblem Three Houses, Daemon X Machina, and maybe Luigi's Mansion 3, but there were certain announcements that fans were extremely shocked to see. Starting off, Nintendo immediately hit players with the reveal of Super Mario Maker 2. While this announcement may have seemed inevitable, people were still captivated by the improved visuals, new mechanics, and even the addition of a brand new art style, with Super Mario 3D World assets being usable in fan-made levels. It was a great start to the event and a fantastic way for Nintendo to reaffirm its commitment to great multiplayer experiences with infinite replayability. One of the biggest surprises out there was the announcement of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3: The Black Order. The Ultimate Alliance name had not been used in 10 years, so to see that franchise would be making a return with a new art style and the biggest roster to date, plus exclusivity on the Nintendo Switch, was a huge delight and surprise for Nintendo and Marvel fans alike. Nintendo's other headlines were equally impressive. Box Boy plus Box Girl looked to be an extremely fun two-player co-op puzzle game that would be sure to engage friends and family alike. The tease of Joker coming to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate in the next update was deeply exciting, and the blowout reveal for Dragon Quest XI-S coming to the Nintendo Switch was a fantastic way to reaffirm the Switch's commitment to RPGs. Speaking of RPGs, Nintendo also made sure to dedicate 5 minutes exclusively to Fire Emblem Three Houses. This brief showcase focused on the game's world, Fodlan. It also highlighted the protagonist's companion, Sothis, and the role the protagonist would be playing as teacher at Garrick Mach Monastery. players would have to pick between three houses, get it? The Black Eagles led by Edelgard, the Blue Lions led by Dimitri, and the Golden Deer led by Claude. Each house had its own cast of characters and a narrative with unique interactions and endings. This brief showcase also revealed more of how the gameplay differs from Fire Emblem's past. It was a great way to get fans of the series excited about this new direction, as well as make newcomers interested in what the franchise has to offer. As the Nintendo Direct drew to a close, the event still had more to offer. Tetris 99 was a hugely surprising announcement that combined the Battle Royale genre with Tetris, and a Shadow Drop exclusive to Nintendo Switch Online players. Tetris 99 still gets updates even after 6 years, and it's easily one of the best games on the Switch. It twists the Tetris formula to make a more competitive and intense overall experience, and I cannot recommend that enough, especially as I've put well over 100 hours into it myself. Following this, the announcements of huge third-party games like Deltarune Chapter 1, Dead by Daylight, Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, Mortal Kombat 11, and Assassin's Creed 3 were surprising but certainly not unwelcome, as was the reveal that a demo for Daemon X Machina would be available after the Direct. The last three announcements were where things really started to get interesting. For the first time in history, Square Enix were releasing Final Fantasy VII on a Nintendo platform. While Squaresoft initially went to Nintendo amidst the development of Final Fantasy VII, Nintendo made it clear it had no interest in working with CD technology, which led Squaresoft to work with PlayStation instead on the release of Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most iconic RPGs of all time, so to see it come to a Nintendo platform after over 20 years and on the Switch especially was such a big deal. Following this bombshell, Nintendo revealed Astral Chain, a brand new exclusive game from Platinum Games and Nintendo. The game featured police officers in a dystopian future, working with mysterious beings that were linked to them via a chain. It appeared to be Platinum's most ambitious game to date, and the fact it was releasing in August 2019 made fans eager to get their hands on the company's next big project. The last announcement, though, was the biggest of them all. The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening would be receiving a from-the-ground-up remake on Nintendo Switch. The remake sported new mechanics, a brand new visual style, and even hand-animated cutscenes. It looked to be a fantastic return of one of the most beloved Zelda games of all time. Overall, this February 2019 Direct was extremely well received by fans, especially since Nintendo specifically focused on games that were releasing within a few months rather than ones that wouldn't release until 2020 or even 2021. The Direct was an exciting way to kick off Nintendo's 2019, and that excitement would only continue with the Pokémon Presents on February 27th. This Pokémon Presents represented the beginning of a new era for the franchise. While most modern Pokémon events focus on the numerous mobile games in the franchise, this was different, as the 7-minute showcase focused entirely on one pair of games: Pokémon Sword and Pokémon Shield. The emphasis makes sense considering this release marked the first ever mainline Pokémon game ever released for a home console. Upon being announced, it was clear that Game Freak were taking the franchise to new directions never seen before. For one, the new region is bigger than any before it. The visuals and gameplay also seem to have received a major overhaul compared to other entries in the franchise. Despite the event being particularly brief, the announcement of Sword and Shield, the reveal of its starters, plus the confirmation of a late 2019 release date was enough to get fans of the Pokémon series excited for the first time in years. Overall, Nintendo's first few events in 2019 were brilliant and did a fantastic job in getting people excited for its slate of releases throughout the year. There were a huge variety of games to be excited for that would appeal to all sorts of fans regardless of their favorite genre. That excitement and anticipation would only grow as the year continued and E3 loomed on the horizon. Between February and June, Nintendo faced a similar lull period to 2018. It would not hold any directs or announce anything significant until E3 2019. Additionally, there would be very few major games released in the spring. The only exception is Yoshi's Crafted World, the newest entry in the Yoshi platformer franchise. While the game certainly had some creative ideas, cute visuals, and fun gameplay, it didn't stand out in comparison to the other platformers released for the console thus far. Those who played Crafted World enjoyed it, but most weren't interested enough to give the game a try. Considering the Yoshi sub-series hasn't seen a new game since Crafted World, it's clear that Nintendo most likely took this lack of interest to heart. Only time will tell if the franchise will receive another new game on the Nintendo Switch 2. Without question, the most exciting part of this lull period from February to June 2019 was the full reveal of what fans could expect from Joker in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. On April 16th, we'd get a 16-minute long trailer dedicated to the character, who would release alongside version 3.0 on April 17th. This showcase was a huge treat, regardless of if you were a Persona fan or not. You can really feel the level of care that Sakurai and the development team put into Joker in every ounce of his inclusion in Smash Bros. Ultimate. Starting with just the trailer, it was a great surprise to have the cast of Persona 5 return to provide their voices as background narration. This, alongside the use of Last Surprise in the new Beneath the Mask remix, really made this feel like something right out of the original game. The trailer also did a great job showing off what was in store for those hoping to purchase the Joker DLC. A fun character, a great stage, and some fantastic music. Even after 6 years, Joker is still arguably one of the most fun characters to play as in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. His moves are so varied and manage to capture his style from Persona 5 perfectly. Joker's playstyle is divided into 2 phases. The first is his default, where he only wields a few skills that players would recognize. He wields a curse spell, Iha, his knife, his gun, a grappling hook, and a pseudo block. That pseudo block is the most important part of this phase. As you use it, not only is any damage dealt to you mitigated, but a meter begins to build up. Once that meter is filled, it ultimately leads to Joker's second phase of gameplay, which takes direct advantage of his most iconic persona, Arsene. The choice to use Arsene instead of any other persona in the series makes perfect sense, as his design is deeply associated with the iconography of Persona 5. Upon summoning Arsene, Joker's attacks become boosted. His knife and gun deal more damage, his grappling hook becomes wings, and his curse attack, now Iagon, launches enemies further and is capable of devastating opponents in either 1v1 or 4-player matches. Of course, there's also his final smash, a stylish and signature all-out attack featuring the members of the Phantom Thieves. The group present in this all-out attack is randomized every time, so you'll get a chance to see each Phantom Thief at some point. Joker is extremely fun to control, capable of speeding back and forth across a stage and evading opponents with ease. He is still one of the most beloved characters in the game, loved by both casual and pro players alike. The next key part of the first challenger pack for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is the new stage, Mementos. Mementos is a key location from Persona 5 and is described as a palace birthed from the hearts of the masses. The stage has a predominantly red backdrop, trains roaming back and forth, and even members of the Phantom Thieves who appear on the stage. Also, there's a fun Easter egg. If you pick a song from either Persona 4 or Persona 3, the stage changes to match the aesthetic and color of those games. Mementos is a pretty fun stage with a fairly unique structure, a good balance of platforms, and a reasonable amount of hazards. It may not be the most mechanically interesting stage, but it does stick out visually and fits right in with the other 103 in the game. The Challenger Pack also includes 11 new tracks from the Persona franchise, primarily from Persona 3 through Persona 5. This includes Last Surprise, a remix of Beneath the Mask, Wake Up, Get Out There, Rivers in the Desert, and Our Beginning from Persona 5. Reach Out to the Truth, a remix of I'll Face Myself and Time to Make History from Persona 4, Mass Destruction from Persona 3, and Battle Hymn of the Soul and a remix of Aria from the Soul from throughout the franchise. It's a great selection of tracks and already demonstrates how committed the developers are to avoiding a case similar to the inclusion of Cloud from Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U and 3DS, where only 2 tracks from Final Fantasy VII were ever brought over. The first Challenger Pack set a huge bar that Nintendo would continue to meet and exceed time and time again. While there was nothing particularly wrong with the DLC in Smash 4, the first Challenger Pack for Ultimate already exceeds the qualities of the characters added in its predecessor. The commitment to adding exciting new maps, great visual designs, and a wide selection of tracks is incredible. Plus, with the addition of new Mii costumes based on Morgana, the Persona 4 protagonist, the Persona 3 protagonist, Teddy, Tails, and new content for the base games such as a stage builder, version 3.0 for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was a great start to the game's post-launch content. The bar has been raised, and Nintendo would thankfully go on to push that bar further and further to make one of the best fighting games ever even better. After April though, things would slow even more until June. The wait for E3 2019 felt particularly agonizing, but the wait would pay off, as Nintendo's last ever E3 showcase is still, in my opinion, its best direct to date. Nintendo held its E3 2019 showcase on June 11th. This would mark the company's last direct for the event, as E3 would not be held in person in 2020, 2021, 2022, or 2023. The event only returned in 2021 as an online-only experience, but Nintendo did not have a direct there. At first, E3's cancellation was due to COVID-19. As the years went by, it would soon be overtaken by Jeff Keighley's similar project, Summer Game Fest. The group behind E3, the ESA, would finally announce the end of E3 as a concept in December 2023. At the time of E3 though, no one knew that this would be the last time the event would be held, and it's very sad it has yet to return. Even still, Nintendo especially pulled out all the stops to make this an event that no one could ever forget, with new trailers for games releasing in 2019, 2020, and even games that would not see the light of day until 2023. The Direct started off swinging with a new reveal for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the hero from Dragon Quest XI. Not only did this reveal bring the beloved Dragon Quest series to Smash for the very first time, but players could even switch their cosmetics to the protagonists from Dragon Quest 3, 4, and 8. The trailer showed off some of the hero's magical-based attacks and even had a CGI prologue that put the hero in the same setting as Link, Meta Knight, Shulk, Samus, and countless others. Despite not reaching the same level of immediate excitement as Joker from Persona 5, it was a huge announcement and a great way to show Nintendo's continued dedication to Ultimate's post-launch support. If you happen to be unfamiliar with Dragon Quest XI or its iconic theme, Nintendo had you covered there too, as the company announced that Dragon Quest XI's Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition would arrive in September 2019. Before you even had a chance to breathe, the Direct announced Doug Bowser, the new Nintendo of America CEO. A few months prior, Reggie Fils-Aimé departed the company after over 15 years, so Bowser had the near impossible task of following one of gaming's most beloved figures. All things considered, the Direct did a fantastic job of introducing him, even having a gag of him coming face to face with another Bowser, one that most people are more familiar with. Nintendo would then highlight new footage of Luigi's Mansion 3. The trailer focused on some of the game's mechanics, story, its modes, and of course the reveal of Luigi. It was a great preview of what fans could expect from the next entry in the Luigi's Mansion franchise, and only continued the momentum that Nintendo was riding on during this Direct. That momentum only grew after yet another trailer, this time for The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. The trailer showed off more of its gameplay and stunning visuals, as well as the announcement of a Dungeon Maker mode. This trailer also confirmed Link's Awakening's September 2019 release date, and the excitement for this beautiful remake would only grow after this short preview. However, this would not be the only announcement made pertaining to the Zelda franchise during this Direct, as the best was still yet to come. Nintendo only had more to offer as the Direct continued, especially if you were an RPG fan. The very next announcement was a remake of the third entry in the Mana franchise, Trials of Mana. Not only was this remake set to release in early 2020, but also the original 3 Mana games released later that day for the Nintendo Switch. For fans of more gruesome third-party RPGs, Nintendo also revealed an impossible port. The Witcher 3 would be coming to the system later that year. Of course, it wouldn't be a segment about RPGs on Switch without mentioning Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem Three Houses was set to release on July 26, 2019, and the latest trailer revealed an exciting development for the story. A time jump that would take place amidst the narrative. This time jump would take the game's 3 house leaders to their extremes, as the preview teased a far darker turn for the story that would take place. The story-focused trailer helped to sell many who weren't familiar with the franchise or were cautious about the new direction on 3 houses. The Nintendo Switch's third-party lineup only looked more and more impressive as the Direct went on, especially with the reveal of Resident Evil, Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 6 for the console, with the first 3 being available that same day, while 5 and 6 would launch in the fall. There'd also be the announcement of a brand new No More Heroes, one that wasn't a spin-off like Travis Strikes Again and was a proper No More Heroes 3. The sequel would continue the series for the first time in almost a decade. There was even the showcase of a remake of Panzer Dragoon, a cult classic 1995 Sega Saturn title that would get new life for the first time since the early 2000s. Another huge game shown during the E3 2019 Direct was Pokémon Sword and Shield. The event built on what had already been shown during the Pokémon Direct just the week before and focused more on the gameplay, characters, new region, and of course the new Pokémon you can find throughout the game. After that was Astral Chain, which was just a few months away from launch. This trailer focused more on the game's story, while also hinting at some insane gameplay that fans could expect. There were some smaller announcements for games such as Cadence of Hyrule, a game that combined Crypt of the Necrodancer with the Legend of Zelda series. There was also a new trailer for Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 and the reveal of Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. In the grand scheme of things though, these announcements paled in comparison to Animal Crossing New Horizons. For the first time in years, fans had a new Animal Crossing to look forward to. This new game looked beautiful, taking the franchise to home consoles for the very first time since the Wii, featuring new mechanics such as the ability to hop over lakes and dig up trees. There were also some brand new villagers and the confirmation of multiplayer. While the delay from a 2019 release to a March 20th, 2020 release was a bit disappointing, people were still very excited for this upcoming game. At the time of New Horizons' announcement though, no one expected how massive the game would be upon its release due to factors that no one could predict. However, that's a subject for our next episode, so be sure to stay tuned for that one. As the E3 2019 Direct drew to an end, Nintendo would focus on several more third-party titles. Some of these games were imminently set to release, such as Spyro Reignited Trilogy and My Friend Pedro. Some wouldn't release until 2020, like with Doom Eternal, and others still have not released to this day, such as Hollow Knight Silk Song. Before fans could get too comfortable, there was yet another huge surprise: a second Super Smash Bros. Ultimate character announcement. The trailer started with a focus on villains, yet transitioned to Donkey Kong, K. Rool, and Diddy Kong lying down in their house. People were confused until a jigsaw piece bounced across the screen. If you were there watching on June 11th, 2019, you could almost hear the sounds of people screaming around the world, because despite a brief fake out with the Duck Hunt dog and bird, no one was prepared to see Banjo-Kazooie on their screens. One of the key pillars of the Nintendo 64 lineup, people have been wanting to see the bear and the bird in Super Smash Bros. Since the beginning. Unfortunately, as a result of Rare being purchased by Microsoft, the Banjo-Kazooie franchise was on hiatus after a particularly disastrous attempt from the developers to make a new kind of game in the form of nuts and bolts. Even though the franchise is still on hiatus today, Banjo-Kazooie were still able to make an appearance in what would go down in history as the biggest crossover ever in gaming, and honestly one of the biggest in general. The characters were showcased beautifully with a wide variety of moves from the original game, a spiral mountain stage, a beautiful music track, and countless references for all fans to enjoy. It was also wonderful and a great touch to see Banjo and Kazooie on screen alongside Donkey Kong and King K. Rool, a beautiful nod to the original Rareware days. The confirmation of a fall release date for Banjo-Kazooie and a summer release date for the hero had Smash Bros. Looking like a game that Nintendo wanted to make as big as it possibly could. The announcement of Banjo-Kazooie for Smash Bros. Ultimate was a fantastic way to round out one of the best Nintendo Directs in history, except that wasn't the end. Nintendo had one last bombshell for fans. A bombshell that showed Link and Zelda in the Breath of the Wild art style exploring the dark depths of Hyrule. A corruption spread as they journeyed deeper and a haunting chant played in the background. At the center of the corruption was a mummified corpse with familiar red eyes, and as Hyrule Castle lifted into the sky, we were left with one last message. The sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is now in development. Needless to say, Nintendo had switched into overdrive and were ready to show the world that by the time they were done, the Nintendo Switch was going to be the best console ever made. After such a big event like E3 2019, Nintendo fans wouldn't be blamed for thinking that things would slow down after this. Maybe there'd be another dry period, maybe we wouldn't get another major game until September or even October. Unfortunately for everyone's wallets though, there would be a new major game released every single month until December. This started just a few weeks after the Nintendo Direct with Super Mario Maker 2. In the grand scheme of things, especially at launch, Mario Maker 2 doesn't do anything insanely different compared to its predecessor. While there are several new mechanics for level creators and the introduction of a Super Mario 3D World theme, Looking at the game from a distance as a casual fan of the original Mario Maker game, you may not be particularly interested in everything the sequel has to offer. For dedicated level creators though, Mario Maker 2 was a dream come true. People used the newly introduced features to take the engine to its limits, creating levels that varied from being extremely difficult to being something like right out of the main Mario franchise. Levels were easy to make, and being able to mix features, use the various themes, and test levels on the fly were great at making the process more seamless and exciting than ever before. Plus, with the new story and multiplayer modes, Mario Maker 2 did a far better job than its predecessor at appealing to all types of fans regardless of their interest in creating levels. Later, the game would add the ability to make entire worlds, leading creative individuals to make designs that felt like Mario games in their own right. Super Mario Maker 2 is a fantastic title, and even if it doesn't reach the same heights as some of the other games from Nintendo in 2019, it is still being played by people to this day. Only time will tell how Nintendo continues to push the sub-series in the coming years, especially with the imminent release of the Nintendo Switch 2. July not only brought a major new game, but Nintendo officially announced its first new iteration of the Nintendo Switch system, Nintendo Switch Lite. The console would remove the dock functionality from the original Switch model, as it is geared toward players who prefer the handheld console style of Nintendo's past. Despite its lower battery life, smaller screen, and the inability to detach the Joy-Cons, the lightweight and affordable price of $200 made it the perfect option for players who wanted to play 2019's biggest games entirely in handheld mode. The Nintendo Switch Lite would go on to release in September alongside Link's Awakening Remake and sell over 2 million units after just a few days. It was a fairly successful venture for Nintendo, and one that would eventually lead to the next big question. If there's a Nintendo Switch Lite, when will we get a more powerful Nintendo Switch? Welcome to the era of Nintendo Switch Pro rumors. It never ended, folks. Nintendo's next big game, Fire Emblem Three Houses, would release barely a month later. Three Houses was the first Fire Emblem game for millions due to its more streamlined mechanics, console release, and a frankly impressive marketing campaign. While it's a divisive game for many hardcore fans of the franchise, it's still extremely well received after 6 years. Starting with the gameplay, Fire Emblem Three Houses does a fantastic job of taking what people expect from the series and updating it for modern audiences and home consoles. The game still follows the chess-like structure where you move your characters like pieces on a board, responding to enemy weapons with counters that will take them apart within moments. With every attack though, the game goes to an in-game representation of the fight, almost like a more traditional RPG. The combat is extremely fun, regardless of if you've played a Fire Emblem game before or if you've never even heard of the series. Another major piece of Three Houses' gameplay formula is the exploration of Garrick Mach Monastery. The game's protagonist, Byleth, is a mercenary turned teacher who must join one of the game's three houses. The Black Eagles, Golden Deer, and Blue Lions all have unique narratives and a huge cast of characters, all with their own arcs. As a teacher though, you will be interacting with all of them. You eat with them at lunch, give them tests, train them, and in Fire Emblem tradition, help to create relationships between characters. These features aren't just to endear you to the characters and world of Three Houses though. Taking advantage of the Garrick Mach Monastery system allows your party to grow even stronger, and you can even use it to change a specific character's fighting style. You can make a more magic-focused character into a fighter, or have someone adept with swords instead turn to a bow and arrow. This is not to undermine the story, as the narrative is truly spectacular in its own right. The numerous twists and turns, the gray line between good and evil, plus the various ways in which the story of each house differs makes things insanely compelling. I highly recommend giving the game a try, and definitely play it more than once, as you'll be surprised by just how unique each house leader is and how their story advances, especially after the time jump. Before we'd receive yet another new game in August, Nintendo announced that Hero would release for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate on July 30th, 2019. He released alongside a 21-minute presentation from Masahiro Sakurai dedicated to the character. This would mark the first time that Sakurai released a full overview video for a character, as Joker only received a 15-minute edited trailer. In comparison, Mr. Sakurai Presents was a more informal presentation where Sakurai went into detail about the character's history, their moveset, and other things players could expect with the new Challenger Pack. He would go on to do this with every single DLC character afterwards. Hero is an interesting character. As mentioned before, his inclusion would not reach the same level of excitement in some of the later DLC releases. In fact, he was overshadowed barely 30 minutes after his reveal by Banjo-Kazooie. This applies to a lot of the fundamentals of his inclusion, such as his moveset, the stage, and the music. Starting with the gameplay, Hero uses several mechanics from the original Dragon Quest series. This includes critical hits, various spells, and even an MP magical point meter that can deplete as you use more spells. The variety of spells is phenomenal and includes zap magic, whoosh magic that gives a higher jump, the ability to reflect projectiles, and more. It's such a great way to differentiate him from other characters like Link, who utilize both a sword and shield. His final smash is also a great nod to the rest of the Dragon Quest series, showing off many of its characters. The new stage, Yggdrasil's Altar, is not too remarkable, unfortunately. It's similar to some of the other stages throughout Ultimate in that the platform moves around a specific setting. In this case, that setting is one from Dragon Quest XI. While it looks beautiful, there isn't much that happens in the background compared to similar types of stages. It's fairly forgettable and doesn't stick out all too much. Even the choices of Mii costumes weren't too interesting. Only 3 were available: Airdrick, Martial Artist, and a Slime, all of which are from the Dragon Quest series. While they aren't bad picks per se, it continues the key problem with Hero's inclusion. This Challenger Pack doesn't do many things that are special compared to the one that preceded it and the ones that will follow it. As such, many consider his inclusion to be fairly forgettable in the grand scheme of things. That said, he's still a character with immense popularity and fans, and the fact that we got a Dragon Quest character in Smash is yet another notch in a game that is already representing some of the medium's biggest hits. In August, we'd get Astral Chain, one of Platinum's most underrated projects. Even after all these years, it's still a game that many look back on fondly, yet it doesn't have the same level of attention as the Bayonetta and Nier franchises. It's a real shame because Astral Chain has mechanics that rival everything that Platinum has done before. The gameplay is incredibly satisfying and exciting to learn the ins and outs of. The protagonist has access to legions, creatures made to combat the wave of terrifying chimera terrorizing the city. These legions can be used for traversal, puzzle solving, and of course, combat. You can team up with your legion, working in tandem with it as you double team an enemy, or divide and conquer by taking on multiple enemies at once. Further, if you wrap the chain that connects you and your legion together around your opponent, you'll temporarily stun them. So many intricacies to take advantage of, yet it never felt overwhelming. After just a few hours of playing, you can't help but immediately hit a zen state, as every combat encounter is exciting, challenging, yet fair. While the story of Astral Chain is by no means its biggest selling point, the intriguing mystery and great characters are more than enough to keep anyone engaged from beginning to end. It's also quite challenging to really rival the aesthetic that Astral Chain is able to provide, as the environments are so beautiful and really do a great job of immersing you in this world. Astral Chain is still a game I think fondly of after all these years, and one that I can't wait to replay again. Hopefully, we'll see Platinum and Nintendo make a sequel someday. In September, we'd get our last major Nintendo Direct of the year. While the event would pale in comparison to the E3 2019 Direct, mostly focusing on trailers for previously announced games, there were still a few worthwhile announcements. For one, it was revealed that Banjo-Kazooie would be releasing after the Nintendo Direct, alongside a new Mr. Sakurai Presents. There was also the announcement of a brand new character coming to the game. Unfortunately, a few days prior, SNK's logo was spotted on the Nintendo of Europe Smash website before being quickly removed. That said, no one knew which character would appear. Would it be Iori, Mai Shiranui, Geese Howard, or maybe even Rock? In hindsight, it was no surprise to see Terry Bogard himself grab the Smash invitation and lift it up. Terry is arguably the most iconic SNK character in history, and having him be in the same game as Ryu, Ken, and others from various franchises across the gaming medium just made sense. What was a surprise was the confirmation that not only would Terry be releasing in November, but that more DLC fighters were in development beyond the 5 that were already on the way. It was clear that Nintendo had big plans for Smash, even years after its initial launch in 2018. New trailers for Link's Awakening, Pokémon Sword and Shield, the confirmation of Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE for the Switch, and SNES games which would be available as part of the Nintendo Switch Online service were great to see. New footage for Animal Crossing New Horizons also did great in showing off the new mechanics such as crafting, more freeform furniture placement, and the joys of living on a deserted island. New Horizons was looking to be a fantastic addition to the Animal Crossing franchise that was sure to appeal to fans all around the world. The big One More Thing announcement of the show was something people had been wanting but no one thought would ever happen: a remastered version of Xenoblade Chronicle. Not only did the game feature updated visuals, but it would also include brand new story content. For a series that almost never made it to North America, it's incredible to see just how far Xenoblade went from 2017 to 2019. Even if this announcement didn't match the excitement of the E3 2019 event, this Direct was still a great way to cap off a year filled with life-changing announcements from Nintendo. There was still so much in store, however. For one, there was the addition of Banjo-Kazooie in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Sakurai's presentation highlighted the history of the characters and also revealed that Microsoft were apparently happy to have the duo join the game. Banjo-Kazooie is still one of the most well-designed characters in Smash Ultimate. His design is a perfect update of how he looked in the original while still keeping the visual identity he's known for. His moveset is lifted directly from the Banjo-Kazooie franchise and features his normal attacks, the ability to use Kazooie as a weapon, Eggs as a projectile, the Wonder Wing charge attack, and a grenade egg. There's also his Ginginator, which is lifted straight from the ending of the original Banjo-Kazooie game. These attacks make Banjo-Kazooie unlike any character in Smash Ultimate and are a perfect representation of everything that makes them as iconic as they are. Spiral Mountain is also a great stage. The fact that it rotates and you can see Gruntilda, Bottles, Mumbo Jumbo, and a Buzz Bomb in the background are great touches. I especially like how you can see Gruntilda's lair in 2D running in the distance. The choices of music were also perfect, and it was wonderful to see the series' original composer Grant Kirkhope return to make new arrangements for some of the tracks. Needless to say, Banjo-Kazooie's inclusion was perfect, and he felt right at home alongside Mario, Link, Donkey Kong, King K. Rool, Samus, and Kirby. It's worth noting that the biggest takeaway from this showcase wasn't even Banjo-Kazooie. In spite of how many people were excited for his inclusion, the big surprise were the Mii costumes Sakurai and the team chose. First, there was Goemon from Mystical Ninja Goemon, Proto Man and Zero from Mega Man and Mega Man X, and a few Team Rocket members. Then, out of literally nowhere, Sans from Undertale showed up. The forever joke of Sans in Smash came to a devastating end, as not only was he included as a Mii costume, but he also came with a new arrangement of Megalovania, his iconic boss theme from the original Undertale game. Sakurai went into more detail about Sans and revealed that Toby Fox made the new arrangement, and that Toby and Sakurai have played Smash Bros. Together at Sakurai's house. It was a fantastic showcase and one that many Nintendo fans will remember for years to come, if not for Banjo, then for the bombastic reveal of Sans' inclusion as a Mii fighter in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Before September came to an end, Nintendo still had one more thing, The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening remake. Grezzo did a fantastic job with resurrecting one of the more underrated entries in the franchise. The most striking part of the remake is the visuals. The game is absolutely beautiful and does a great job at combining the cel-shaded art with a more chibi style. The lighting is vibrant, the characters look adorable, and it's still one of the best looking games on Nintendo Switch. The gameplay is pretty much exactly what you'd expect from the series, especially if you've played The Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds. The game features a top-down perspective where enemies will go down with a few swipes. Dungeon crawling and exploration is key, and Link's Awakening upholds that very well. The story is also not what you might expect and attempts to do something new with the traditional narrative that no one expected when the game first released for the Game Boy. I think the only major issue with the game is that aside from the visuals and new dungeon maker, it doesn't really do anything new, but does it really need it? It is a near one-to-one remake, which both works to its advantage if you haven't played the original before, but also to its disadvantage if you've played it to death. Despite this, The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening is a landmark title for the Nintendo Switch and continues the console's devotion to consistent yet varied Zelda adventures. Released fittingly on Halloween 2019, Luigi's Mansion 3 refined everything great about the series while introducing fresh mechanics and stunning visuals. This time, Luigi was set to explore the Last Resort, a haunted hotel with different themed floors ranging from a medieval castle to a haunted movie studio. The famous poltergust device is back, this time with the G00 model. This made for many new abilities to use throughout gameplay. There's the slam attack, which can be used against ghosts in combat, the suction shot, which is great for puzzle solving, and the burst ability, which allowed the poltergust to shoot out air below Luigi and blow away ghosts or other objects. Of course, the most famous and standout mechanic the game was built around was Gooigi, this gelatinous Luigi doppelganger that was used to help navigate different puzzles and could even be used for co-op play. If these new gameplay elements weren't enough, there's also a slew of incredible boss battles. Each boss has unique attacks you have to navigate around and also a very fun personality that's unique to each of them. Additionally, Luigi's Mansion 3 is still easily one of the best looking games on Switch, still looking straight up like an animation at times. Combined with the wonderful lighting techniques and eerie sound design, Luigi's Mansion 3 is simply one of the most innovative and technically impressive games on the platform. The game has proven to be a monumental success for Nintendo, selling almost 15 million copies. This has always been one of my favorite series from Nintendo, and I'm glad it's finally found a huge audience on Switch. Let's just hope that Next Level Games is already hard at work on Luigi's Mansion 4. November would be when Nintendo finally started to wind down for the year with a few more major announcements and releases before 2019 came to a close. The former was another Smash character showcase, this time for Terry Bogard. Terry is yet another great character addition that truly feels like a love letter to the Fatal Fury and King of Fighters franchise. It makes sense considering Sakurai goes into great detail on his love for this series during the presentation. All of Terry's moves are lifted directly from his depictions in the Fatal Fury series. He has his jabs, high kicks, and body blow, plus a jumping karate punch, buster throw, power wave, burning knuckle, crack shot, and a rising tackle. If you choose to use the original inputs from the Fatal Fury games, you can even use a stronger version of all of the aforementioned attacks. His final smash combines his triple geyser, power dunk, and buster wolf all in one devastating combo. The stage is also fantastic as it is an arena right from the King of Fighters franchise. The stage includes several major SNK characters like Andy Bogard, Joe Higashi, Rock Howard, Geese Howard, Blue Mary, Iori Yagami, and countless others. Very sadly though, no Mai Shiranui, unfortunately, because, and I quote, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is for good boys and girls of many different ages, so we decided not to feature her. It's such a shame considering she would later show up in Street Fighter 6, but I digress. The detail that your choice of music on the stage would affect which character showed up almost made up for this glaring omission. Speaking of music, there are 50 songs included as part of this Challenger Pack. These vary from tracks from Fatal Fury, King of Fighters, and even Metal Slug. Needless to say, even if Terry likely didn't appeal as much to players unfamiliar with SNK, his inclusion was straight up brilliant. Plus, the level of detail that Sakurai added as part of his character made so many people eager to try the Fatal Fury series for the first time. The last major game Nintendo had for us in 2019 was easily its biggest, Pokémon Sword and Shield. This duo of games had faced countless controversies on the lead up to launch, namely the divisive visuals and the decision to reset the continued Pokédex that certain fans have been building since the original game. Even now, Sword and Shield is a game that has very mixed reception. In terms of the good, many people love the Pokémon themselves. The starters and new inclusions are perfect and fit in great with the rest of the series. Plus, the open world design felt like a perfect renovation of the traditional exploration that fans expect from the series. Unfortunately, this would be the end of the pros. The visuals were lacking and felt rushed, especially with the absurd levels of pop-in graphics and low-resolution assets. The exclusion of certain Pokémon from throughout the series also felt like a slap in the face to long-term fans. It didn't help that both the story and exploration were deeply forgettable in comparison to prior entries in the series. The main consensus from many die-hard fans was that the game was rushed and that it was a poor showing for the mainline series debut on home consoles. In spite of this mixed acclaim though, the game still sold nearly 20 million copies within the first year and has sold over 25 million copies as of today. It was a lesson that taught people that Pokémon would always be loved, even if it has mechanics and features that are hated by most major fans of the series. Even as Game Freak and the Pokémon Company would continue to iron out these issues and learn from their mistakes in subsequent games, this lesson would still remain in the coming years as that divisiveness would only grow in the years ahead. At the time though, Sword and Shield was a game that most people hated yet still completed in its entirety. Regardless, the release of a new Pokemon game was a perfect capstone to one of Nintendo's best years in its history. Going into 2019, no one expected Nintendo to go as hard as they did. For most of the year, they gobsmacked fans with announcements that no one expected, such as a Breath of the Wild sequel and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. For the other half of the year, we got games that are still considered some of the best you can find on Nintendo Switch, like Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Astral Chain, Link's Awakening, Luigi's Mansion 3, Super Mario Maker 2, and more. It was everything that fans wanted and more, and even the more divisive releases like Sword and Shield were mitigated by something like the many new characters added to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It is still a year that many people look back on fondly in retrospect, citing it as one of the best on Nintendo Switch, and one that fans hope that Nintendo will match again with the Switch 2. 2020 was a different beast entirely, as both players and developers had to deal with the unexpected reality of a global pandemic that put the entire world on pause. Nintendo was not unaffected by the lockdowns, as it was forced to tone down its output of releases to a drastic extreme. In spite of this disaster though, Nintendo still managed to make an impact. Even if 2020 would not reach the same levels of hype as 2019, it was still yet another year where Nintendo continued to prove that Nintendo Switch was its best console to date. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 3 of Nintendo Switch Rewind, where we look back on the third year of Nintendo Switch, 2019. Be sure to let us know down below what your favorite game of 2019 was. And with that being said, we'll catch you in episode 4.